Now, we have addressed the three critical things for setting up a part: the record view, which is the part header; the stores, which is what store does it belong to and what the default bin is. And if you got into that auto reorder from low stock, what you do there. The fourth thing is, where do you get the part? Where can you buy this part from? Now, notice this little area up here has this little 1, 2, 3 button that gives you a total record count. You could have an infinite number of suppliers that could supply that part to you, but you could only have one that is preferred. The preferred supplier is the one, when you create a requisition or a purchase order, his stuff will come over automatically. You can change it if you want to, but when you say preferred, that's your guy. That's who you want to buy it from. Now, let me show you something you probably didn't see a moment ago. Over here, we have, on the right side of the screen, a preferred supplier. So if I populated this field with preferred supplier right here, this suppliers tab would be populated with that same supplier, and the preferred checkbox would check. Now, there's something a little fishy going on right here. Let me show you what that is. On the stores tab, you have a different preferred supplier. See this preferred supplier here? It's different. All right. And this preferred supplier can be the same as your other preferred supplier, or it can be different. Let me explain to you why you might want it different. If you're buying this part auto reorder from low stock, you might have your mins and your maxes set to where when you get down to 5, you want to go ahead and buy some. And that means you're not in a big ass hurry to get them in. You can get them in at normal time. It just really don't make a flip because you have that padding in your warehouse. If, on the other hand, you run out and you're in a crunch, you might want to buy from your preferred supplier who might be more expensive but can get it to you quick. So the suppliers tab, the sole purpose is, where do you get these parts? The fields that you have that you can populate are the supplier part description. That is the supplier's description of the part, which could be different from yours. The catalog reference is the supplier part number. They call it catalog reference because if you think about a Grainger catalog, it has a reference number, which is its part number that goes in right here, catalog reference. This is a very important field. I encourage people, when they're setting up their parts, to make this catalog reference field mandatory. And if somebody says, well, hey, I don't have a supplier part number for that, what should I put in there? And I'll just quite frankly say, you either put the same part number or you make something up. It really doesn't matter. What's important is, when that's a valid number that your suppliers recognize, then they can supply your order quicker when you place the order. Now, gross price is how much you pay for the part. That's simple. And to the right is the unit of purchase. We talked about this a little while ago. If you're going to buy a box and the part unit of measure is each, well, you can put box in this unit of purchase, but you're required to put in the quantity per unit of purchase. In other words, how many are in the box. If there's 100 in the box and you buy one box, EAM will do the math for you so that your purchase order will look correct and the price will be correct and everybody will be happy. Now, here's a little secret you probably didn't know. As a result of buying parts out of EAM and receiving parts into EAM, this table will populate itself. It will populate with the supplier number. It will populate with the gross price. If you use a catalog reference, it'll populate with that. So this table will fill itself up over time. So you don't necessarily have to get this guy done ahead of time. Now I got one couple of little trimmings I want to show you that might dazzle you. When you're looking at a part like we are right now, okay, this air filter right here, any part, it doesn't matter. When you want to know what's gone on with that part in the past, there's 2 or 3 different places you want to go. First of all, the transactions tab will show you everything that ever happened to that part. Now notice this data spy says recent transactions. If I edit it, if I copy it and I rename it to all, and I remove this date, and I make it my default data spy. Now I'm looking at all transactions, not just the past 30 or 90 days for this part. Now there haven't been any, and I'd be surprised if any of these have, but what this tab will show you is every change ever made to the part that affects quantity and or price. So when you receive the part, it'll show up right here and it'll have a price on it. When you issue the part, it'll show up here and it'll have a price on it. If you change the price manually, it will come in here and show that you did that. If you change the quantity that you have on hand here, it will automatically create a transaction saying who done it and when they done it. So when you have parts, you can't get away with changing the quantity or the price without it being recorded as a transaction for eternity. Now, this is one thing I wanted you to be aware of. The other thing I wanted you to be aware of is probably something you wouldn't think about, but when you click on the More tab, and you come way down here on the bottom, there is this tab called Where Used. Every time you issue a part to a work order, this Where Used populates automatically saying that this part was issued to a work order and it is now associated to the equipment that that work order was against every time. So the smart people, the engineers and people, they call this BOMs, bill of materials. This is your bill of material. This is half of your bill of material. This is what builds automatically when you issue a part to a work order. Now, I owe it to you to explain a little further. If I go and look at an actual asset itself, instead of a part, and I come over here to this More tab, even though this part's withdrawn, don't pay any attention to that. And I come down here and I look at parts associated. This shows me every part that I ever issued to a work order with this piece of equipment on it. Every time. This table just builds and builds and builds and builds. So one thing you want to do, what's best practice is you don't go issuing tape, bubble gum, safety glasses, spray paint. You don't go issuing those kinds of parts to work orders. It's not a good practice. You want the spare part that is required to keep that piece of equipment running only. You don't want to issue a broom. You don't want to issue stuff that is irrelevant. You really want to keep these parts issued that are critical to keeping the production line going. Now, if this wasn't fun enough for you, let me go a little further and show you how this is used on work orders to your benefit. Now, when you're looking at a work order like this one, it really doesn't matter what I look at on here. This parts tab is what we're going to talk about. All right. When I click on the parts tab, I'm presented with this screen right here. Since this is a completed work order, these fields are grayed out, but it doesn't matter for the purposes of explanation. If I was to go and select a part to be used on this work order, I have done nothing other than tell the world that I'm going to use this part on this work order. I haven't used it. I've just said I'm going to use it. The whole purpose of this screen is for somebody to say, hey, we're going to use these parts, just a heads up. Now, let me show you what else you can do. You can put in a planned quantity saying, I plan on using 5 of these parts. You can reserve those 5 parts, which tells the warehouse, hey, somebody has reserved 5 of these parts. When we reorder from low stock, let's take that into consideration and buy replacements. And then I hear the question all the time, everywhere I go, saying, well, what if you reserved them and then you decided you didn't want to use them? Too bad. You accidentally had the warehouse buy 5 more than you actually needed. All right, so you got to be careful with that field right there. Now, when you're on this tab of a work order, it will populate with your store and it will tell you how many of these parts you have available. And if you don't have any available, then you probably want to buy the part. And that's what this planned source is over here, stock, is you're looking for this part to be on a shelf. And if it ain't on the shelf, then you're going to change the planned source to direct purchase. Now, I know that's a lot to swallow right now, probably more than you wanted to go, but I wanted you to see down here is when you get down to using these parts on a work order, down here is where you issue them or return them. Now, this is all on the iPad. It's actually easier to do on the iPad. You can scan the part on the iPad, not on the front end of the application unless you had a wedge or something like that. So it's not there for you. But this is where the excitement comes in. When you're doing a work order and you hit actions, this is the grand poobah. The import parts list will go and look at what equipment is on this work order. And then it'll go look at the parts associated list and bring over all of the parts that are associated to that equipment for this work order. Now, you can remove the parts if you don't want them, and you can select which ones you want to bring over. You don't have to take the entire list. This is a big time saver right here. Now, not only can you import the parts list from the where used of the equipment, you can also import a material list. So here's how this works. When you're looking at the parts tab and you want to bring over some parts, you can click import parts list. And let's say this piece of equipment is kind of new and it's never had anything issued to it before. You could change this to go look at a material list. And then you look the material list up and you can bring over the parts. And I don't think there's any to look at. Now, the other thing is, if your work order equipment has never had any activity, that is the equipment, it's a brand new pump, you can go look at another piece of equipment that is like that piece of equipment and bring those parts over. And so when you change this from work order equipment to equipment, you look up another piece of equipment right here and you bring its parts over and you can use those parts. Now that's the way to move around this field and move it quickly.